Imagine, if you will, a quiet room somewhere in the middle of the 20th century, a modest study in Warsaw, books stacked like ancient city walls, and a man hunched over a desk, scribbling notes that would one day unsettle the very idea of what it means to be sane. That man is Kazimierz Dabrowski, a Polish psychiatrist and psychologist who looked at human suffering not as something to be medicated away at the first opportunity, but as a possible doorway, a rather dramatic and uncomfortable doorway, into something richer, deeper, more alive. He called his theory positive disintegration, and it is one of those ideas that once you grasp it, you cannot quite look at your own irritations, anxieties, or midnight crises in the same light again. Let us begin where Dabrowski himself liked to begin, with the observation that most of us spend our lives trying to hold ourselves together. We wake up, we paste on the appropriate social smile, we navigate traffic, deadlines, small talk, and we do our level best not to fall apart. Integration, in the ordinary sense, is the glue of a civilization. It is what allows the accountant to balance the books, the parent to pack the lunchboxes, the politician to deliver the speech without bursting into tears. Yet Dabrowski dared to suggest that this very integration, this seamless fitting in with the world as it is, might be the shallow achievement of a shallow life. Real growth, he said, begins the moment the glue starts to fail. Positive disintegration is not a gentle nudge towards self-improvement. It is closer to an earthquake. The self you have carefully constructed, your habits, your certainties, the story you tell about who you are, begins to crack. And instead of rushing to patch the fissures with therapy speak or retail therapy, or another glass of wine, Dabrowski invites you to stand in the rubble and ask, what now? What might be built from these fragments that is truer, braver, more authentically mine? He described 5 levels of human development, like stories in a psychological skyscraper. Most of us, most of the time, live on the ground floor, what he called primary integration. Here everything is black and white, us versus them, right versus wrong, my tribe good, your tribe bad. Think of the football hooligan, the corporate shark, the social media warrior who blocks anyone who disagrees. Their personality is a fortress, armored and airtight. Suffering, when it comes, is external. I am fine. The world is wrong. There is no inner conflict, because there is barely an inner life. Then something happens, a betrayal, a death, a book that lands like a hand grenade in the certainties. The fortress develops its first hairline fracture. Welcome to level 2, unilevel disintegration. Suddenly the old answers feel flimsy. You compare yourself endlessly to others. You chase approval. You oscillate between grandiosity and self-loathing. It is the realm of the midlife crisis, the influencer meltdown, the teenager who cannot decide whether to dye their hair pillar box red or shave it all off in despair. Everything feels equally valid and equally pointless. Dabrowski is blunt. This is not yet growth. It is merely the first loosening of the screws. But loosening is necessary because only when the old structure wobbles can you begin to choose which parts are worth keeping. Level 3, spontaneous multi-level disintegration, is where the real drama begins. For the first time you glimpse a hierarchy of values. You sense that some ways of being are higher, more authentic, more humane than others. The accountant realizes that cooking the books might buy a yacht, but it corrodes something essential inside. The parent sees that shouting at the child to behave is easier than examining why the child's pain triggers such rage. This is the level of the great artists, the activists, the insomniacs who lie awake wondering whether they are living up to their own potential. Inner conflict is now ferocious because two voices are arguing. The voice of, "This is how the world works, get with the program," and the voice of, "But I could be more." Dabrowski believed that certain people are simply wired for this conflict. He spoke of overexcitabilities, 5 of them: psychomotor, sensual, intellectual, imaginational, and emotional. Imagine a nervous system turned up to 11. The psychomotor type cannot sit still, paces, gesticulates, runs marathons to burn off the surplus energy. The sensual type is overwhelmed by the scent of rain on hot pavement, the texture of silk, the minor chord in a pop song. The intellectual type asks why, until everyone else wants to throttle them. The imaginational type lives half in daydreams, writing novels in their head while queuing for coffee. And the emotional type, well, they feel everything as if it were happening to them personally. The news, the film, the stranger's sigh on the bus. These overexcitabilities are not pathologies. They are raw material. Without them, the earthquake of disintegration might never register. With them, every crack in the facade is amplified into a canyon. And here is the twist that makes Dabrowski so radical. He saw depression, anxiety, even what looked like breakdown, as potential signs of growth. Not every melancholy is a disintegration, of course. Some are just Tuesday. But when the suffering is tied to a clash between what is and what ought to be, when it refuses to be silenced by distraction or drugs, then it might be the psyche doing its arduous renovation work. Level 4 is organized multi-level disintegration. The rubble is no longer random. You start to choose deliberately which values to live by. You say no to the promotion that would make you complicit in something you despise. You apologize properly for the harm you have done. You sit with the grief instead of scrolling past it. This is exhausting because every choice is now conscious, and consciousness is a heavy tool. But it is also exhilarating. For the first time, you are the author of your own character, not merely the actor reading lines handed to you by family, culture, advertising. Finally, level 5, secondary integration. The new structure stands. It is not rigid like the old fortress. It is more like a mature tree, flexible in the storm. Inner conflict has not vanished, but it is no longer civil war. It is creative tension. You live in alignment with your highest values, not perfectly, never perfectly, but with a kind of steady flame. Think of Mandela emerging from prison without bitterness, or the poet who turns childhood trauma into verses that help strangers feel less alone. This is the rare air at the top of Dabrowski's tower, and almost nobody lives here full time, but glimpses are possible, and they are enough to make the whole climb worthwhile. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds suspiciously like romanticizing mental anguish, and you would not be entirely wrong to worry. Dabrowski was careful to distinguish positive disintegration from mere collapse. The key is the direction of the energy. In positive disintegration, the suffering is in service of a higher integration. It is the chrysalis, not the grave. Crucially, it is not solitary. Dabrowski believed we need models, people a little further up the staircase who embody the values we are reaching towards. A teacher who refuses to grade creativity out of a child. A friend who listens without fixing. A writer whose honesty makes you brave. These are the quiet revolutionaries who prove that the tower is not a mirage. There is a lovely Polish word Dabrowski used, autentyczność, authenticity. It is not the Instagram version, all sunsets and slogans. It is the authenticity of the person who has looked at their own shadow and decided with trembling hands to integrate it rather than exile it. Positive disintegration tells us that the road to such authenticity is paved with discomfort, but that discomfort is not the enemy of happiness. It is the price of admission to a larger life. So the next time you find yourself awake at 3 a.m, convinced you are coming undone, pause for a moment. Ask not how do I make this stop, but what is trying to be born here. The answer may be nothing more dramatic than the need for a good night's sleep. Or it may be the first tremor of an earthquake that will, in time, rearrange the furniture of your soul. Either way, Dabrowski would urge you to stay curious. The self you are dismantling might just be making room for the self you are always meant to become.